moment as well to say that the knowledge that's coming out of Gaza is twofold. One of them is lived experience. We're seeing that at that time of the affliction happening to them, we're seeing that iman, we're seeing that faith, we're seeing that belief, and that's what we want for ourselves. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us and to allow us to benefit in our iman, in our faith, like he's benefiting the people of Gaza. The other thing for us to remember is that when we make a dua, Allah لا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. Oh Allah, don't give us a burden more than what like you have given to the people before us, and don't give us a burden more than what we can carry. When we look at what the people of Gaza are facing right now, we have to remind ourselves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ultimately everything is in his control, and he chose that for the people. It doesn't mean that we become complacent. It doesn't mean that we become fatalistic and we don't do something. We do things, but we remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in his ultimate knowledge and wisdom, knows what the people of Gaza can handle, and he gives it to them. And people who their souls cannot handle that, he does not bear their souls with more than what they can they bear. So when we see this, as difficult as it is to see those images, we know that those people, those blessed people of the land of Gaza, are benefiting and are able to carry this with dignity and with pride and iman. We ask Allah to give us, Allahumma arzuqna iman ahli Gaza. Give us the iman, give us the thabat, give us the steadfastness of the people of Gaza. And I'll end with a story. And earlier, Corey was talking about sharing stories of people. And thank you for mentioning that, Corey, because it helps me as well too. And it helps us. We have to be people who can speak truth. Just like that young person who said, we don't need your dua, we need you to do something. So everybody here at Mina, Allah has given you the ability to be Muslim in these lands and to have a voice. Use it and do something. Don't feel incapacitated. Don't feel incapacitated. You can do something, and everybody's going to do something differently. Allah is putting every single one of us in somewhere. It may be just by reposting somebody's post on social media, or by making a comment so that we can help it go viral, or when people say things, especially in institutions, that we hold them accountable. And barakallahu fikum, Corey, and all of the CARE team. I say this with full conviction, and even more conviction now. The number one organization that we as Muslims in America and North America have to support is CARE, because of what they're doing. They are protecting us so that we can have this voice. They are teaching us how to be able to speak about these issues. But I'll end on this, and I'll end on this story. And thank you as well, Corey, for mentioning that thing about controlling, being aware of our emotions. That's a good reminder for myself, and I extend the reminder to everybody else to be aware of the emotions. That I know myself, and I have to know my limits of where I can stand, and I am one of those people who can fall into the temper. And so thank you for that, and I'll say hi, I appreciate it. And it's good as well, because especially as we're seeing these protests, go to the protests and be at the demonstrations. But we're also seeing people lose their cool at some of those and making some very disparaging remarks and anti-Semitic remarks. As Corey said, we don't want to fall into and confirm the bias that people have about Muslims and about people who support Palestine, whether Muslim or not. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to speak the words of truth and to be next to those people who speak words of truth, whether they're Muslim or not. We want to be people who speak words of truth. And so do something. I'll end on this, a story of Samir. Samir was from Khan Yunis, and I got to know Samir because through Palestine Children's Relief Fund. To give you a really quick of where I come from, my parents met on a picket line in Jackson, Mississippi, on a UFW picket line during the grass and lettuce bowl strike in the early 1970s. My father was a grad student from Jordan. My mother was of Irish Catholic background, and she had joined the civil rights movement, fighting for the rights of migrant farmer workers' rights here in the U.S. And my parents met on a picket line. So I was born, alhamdulillah, into just standing up for people's rights. And I saw my parents do it from a very young age. When we moved to California, the first organization that my parents connected to was the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. And if you're not familiar with that organization, please, please, please do it right now. I know people are multitasking. Look it up and look up the story of Steve Stosaby, because he went to Palestine in the 80s as a journalist to report on the stories. And the first thing he saw was all of the children. And so he said, we need to tell their stories. But he didn't want to stop there. He said, we need to do something for the children and to help them heal. And he started the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. And one of the things they did is they would have host families so they could avoid hotel costs. So we hosted a number of children in our home that came here for treatment. So young Samir was from Khan Yunis in Gaza, and this was at a time he was about 7 or 8 years old, and he went to school. So just imagine, you see the kids with their backpacks walking in Gaza. Imagine one of those kids like Samir walking to school, just wanting to learn. And he goes to school, and there's a clash between some protesters in Gaza, and this is in the early 90s, and some of the police there. And they go to his school, and they say all of the kids to leave the school because those teenage protesters came into the school. So all of the kids, imagine little Samir with his backpack, he just wants to learn, and he's going home. And the Israeli occupied forces are shooting so-called rubber bullets, which, if you don't know what the rubber bullets are, it's actual live ammunition coated with rubber bullets. So it's fired from the same firearm that shoots a regular ammunition, and it's fired with the same force. And it's supposedly non-lethal, but they know exactly where to shoot. They shoot Palestinians in their groins. They shoot the men in their groin to render them to not be able to have children. They shoot them in their legs to cause amputations. They shot Samir in his eye, and he lost his eye as an 8-year-old. And he came to the U.S. to get a glass eye, and he was here at Stanford. They were donating the services, and he lived with us for about 2 months. And wallahi al-azim, I swear by Allah, I've never seen a more cheerful child than Samir. I've never seen a more cheerful child than Samir. And even in the face of what he lost, he was always cheerful. And wallahi al-azim, if you sit with the people of Palestine and you sit with the people of Gaza, even in the ma'asi, even during what they're experiencing, they're people of faith, and they're people of cheerful. And we want the world to see them. We want the world to see who Ahl Gaza is. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq, to give us the success, to bring the true picture of Palestine and the true picture of the Palestinians and the true people of Gaza to America and to the world. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us tools of haqq, to make us people who spread truth, and to combat evil and disinformation and falsehood. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and give us the success to be able to do something. Just like the young man in Gaza said to us, to the whole world, we don't need just your dua, we need you to do something. Ya Allah, use us in the best way possible. Use us to our fullest potential. Ya Allah, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Allahumma ansurna wa ansur al-Muslimin fi kulli mahal wa azil al-dhulma ala ahli Gaza wa ala ahli Palestine. Oh Allah, remove oppression from the people of Palestine and the people of Gaza, and give us the ability to remove oppression wherever we are. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh Rami, for that spiritual support. That was an extremely powerful reminder. We're going to be moving into Q&A now, inshallah. We've been receiving questions throughout this call, and I believe that all three of our panelists are still on. So I'm going to read out the questions one by one, and whichever of the panelists who would like to answer can do so, inshallah. The first one is, could you please go over a quick history of the context and when and how the occupation started? A lot of us are facing questions from people who choose to only focus on events from Saturday onwards.
I really appreciate that question. It's actually kind of difficult to really go through the long history of how we got here, in 2023, and being able to provide you with resources, which I will do, Iman, that you can share with folks who have registered for this call. This is and I don't like to use the word conflict, but I'm going to use it only for this context to just try to make this as simple as possible. There was a land called Palestine. From the river to the sea, it was Palestine. This was home to Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And so we're all clear that when they say Jews had ties to the land of Palestine, to the Holy Land, this is absolutely true. And we have coexisted as Palestinian Christians, Arabs, and Jews for millennia in that area, for hundreds and hundreds of years. So we as Palestinians, we understand coexistence. We know what peace looks like. because we have coexisted in that land together. Remember now that it is not just Palestinian Muslims who are under occupation and under siege. There are also our Christian Palestinian sisters and brothers who experience the same horror that we experience under occupation and under siege at the hands of the state of Israel. 1947 was the beginning of the creation of the state of Israel as a home for the Jewish people, really orchestrated by Great Britain. Everybody knows Great Britain is one of the, if anything, probably the most notorious colonizer of pretty much almost all places around the world. And that is when you hear Nakba, and you hear the term Nakba, which is in Arabic translated to English catastrophe, when 750,000 Palestinians were displaced, some were murdered and executed, and 450 villages destroyed to then create the state of Israel. So this is a conflict that's been going on since 1947, and others will argue that it was almost a little bit before that. But for the purposes of the conversations you're having, it started in 1947. Then the state of Israel was created in May of 1948. And since then, the Israeli government had Gaza and the West Bank, which were two Palestinian territories, under military occupation. So when you are military occupied by any other nation state, it means that the military is, the Israeli government pretty much monitors your travel. They monitor who goes in and out of the territories. They have control over your water supply, your electricity supply. They have military checkpoints. You can't even go from one village to the next without passing Israeli military checkpoints. And it is a life of humiliation at the hands of the state of Israel. The next thing that you're going to be asked as we talk about this long conflict, of course, there was another war that happened in 1967, where some Arab nations obviously were in a war with Israel, and the Palestinians lost even more land in 1967. So as from 1948 to 2023, we probably only now have somewhere close to 13% of our original land, not 50%, not 40%. And you've seen many of these maps that show you how the Palestinian people have almost lost all access to their land. The next question you're going to be asked, especially in the context of Hamas, is people will say, well, the Israeli government withdrew their occupation from Gaza in 2006. Technically, if you mean that the military soldiers that had checkpoints and were in the land of the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian Gaza Strip, yes, they did remove their military, but they still control the borders. They control our airspace. They control the sea. They control what goes in and out of Gaza. And as you know, have created conditions that have been called the world's largest open air prison. So do not let people tell you that this is all Hamas's fault, that they're an open air prison. They control the sea. They even control our fishermen who use the sea to fish and bring food to their families. We can't even enjoy being a strip of land that is on the sea. That should not belong to anyone. That belongs to Allah, and it should belong to all people. But the Israeli military also has control over the sea. Another important thing to be very clear about, especially for those of you who math is your, if you love math. One argument that I have made as people continue to use Hamas as a way to justify the murders of Palestinians, to justify how we even got here from the first place before Saturday, is I always tell people, and I hope you all know this because this is very important. Hamas ran in they are a political party, and they also have a resistance arm, an armed resistance. Now, this is not a justification of violence. This is an explanation so you all understand for your own context. They won an election in 2006. But people will say, but why would people vote for Hamas? And what I say to people all the time, and it's something simple for all of you, is that Gaza is population, 50% of the population of Gaza is under the age of 18. They do not vote. They do not participate in elections. 40% of those under the age of 18 are actually under the age of 14. So we're talking about children who are being, again, used to blame why people picked one political party over the other in a place like Gaza. The next thing that I will say to all of you is that, as I explained, this problem or this conflict, this war, this fight over our holy land started in 1947 and 1948, when we displaced or when the Israeli government and the British displaced Palestinians, destroyed our villages, right? That was 1947, 1948. Hamas was only created in 1987. I was 7 years old when Hamas was established. So I tell people all the time, do the math. 1948, Hamas was created in 1987. So people cannot continue to scapegoat one political party or whatever they want to call it. They can call them whatever. You don't even have to correct them. They can call them Islamist, all the words that they use. The relevance here is that they were established in 1987. The occupation began in 1948. So I say to people, do the math. And believe it or not, a lot of people who do not know much about the conflict, do not understand the history of what happened to Palestine, they say, wait a minute. Hamas was only created in 1987, but the occupation and the vilification, dehumanization, deprivation of the Palestinian people, the destroying of villages, the displacement of Palestinians started in 1948. As the young people would say, the math ain't mathing. And so do not let people scapegoat Hamas in this moment. And we're not defending Hamas. We do not, us as Muslims, we do not condone the killing of innocent people. And we hope that any Muslim nation that engages in any acts of war is adhering to Islamic law on the rules of war. We have rules of war. Do not kill elders. Do not kill women. We do not condone raping of prisoners. We actually are taught to treat, at the times of, battles that our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, even treating the hostages and treating people with respect, making sure they had food and water. That's what we know as Islam. So your job is not to defend Hamas. Your job is not to condone Hamas in this moment. Your job is to center the plight of the innocent Palestinian people who have been living under this brutality for the last 75 years. That is 4 times your age right now, that the Palestinian people have been enduring this conflict. So that's the short version. And I think somebody put something in the chat that kind of does a little bit more, an opportunity for you to maybe read later. And I also sent something to Iman that will give you something to kind of sit and study a little bit, because I think it's very important for you to understand the history of Palestine.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that context. Our next question is, what is the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism? How is supporting the Palestinian cause not anti-Semitic?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward to you. We're talking about a political movement versus a faith and an ethnicity. So what I do and what I suggest to people, I actually stopped using the term Zionism, because in my conversations with people from other faiths, I came to understand that it can mean a lot of different things. So when I speak about this topic, and when you see CARE's messaging about this topic, we focus on what we want people to pay attention to: Israeli apartheid and supporters of Israeli apartheid. That is what we are talking about here. That is what our movement is pushing back against. And it's a conversation that happens among Israeli society, right? It's not something that we're just making up. Let me think here. There we go. It was the former Attorney General of Israel recently called the state apartheid. A group of Israeli law professors with the Forum for Democracy also referred to it as apartheid. A professor of the Holocaust at Hebrew University in Jerusalem referred to it as apartheid. And here in the United States, if you follow columnists, Thomas Friedman, who is a conservative columnist, similarly has referred to it that way. So let's call, let's name it what it is, right? Let's name occupation as occupation. It's illegal under international law. And we know that doesn't mean very much, because international law is routinely not enforced. But the illegal occupation and the apartheid has been going on for years now. And that's how you want to talk about it. And, full respect to the questioner, I would disagree that supporting Palestinian humanity equates to anything of bias or racism against people of other faiths. You are simply standing up for the humanity, the dignity, fairness, and respect for a people, and there is nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your response. Our third question is, how do we verify news and media we see online before sharing?
I mean, I feel like that's one that's kind of in my ballpark if we lost Linda. Yep. So not trying to take over space. It's difficult now. Disinformation is rampant on every social media platform. And Linda herself was the target of a Russian government disinformation campaign a few years ago. The best suggestions that we can give you is pause over sharing something until you've seen it from a few different sources. And when I say different sources, I mean like news outlets or social media influencers who you have built up a lot of trust with over a period of years. Because we know that disinformation is being flooded. You saw, I think, the worst incident recently was President Biden essentially reiterating Israeli talking points on something that the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, was not confirming, which is atrocious. So if the president of the United States, with the entire apparatus of the intelligence machinery that we have, can be deceived or deliberately choose to repeat it, whichever one it was, we can be as well. So just pause over the send button, work on confirming information before forwarding it out. And I believe very strongly in the old journalistic standard, look for 3 confirmations of something from reliable news sources, and then I would go ahead and trust it.
Thank you so much. Our final question to wrap up the Q&A is going to be, how do we turn towards Allah when we witness such oppression and injustice instead of losing our faith?
What I would say in response to that is that in this, it's really important for us to reaffirm our belief in Allah, that He is Al-Qadir, He is the one in control over all of His servants. And He is fa'alun lima yurid. At the end of the day, ultimately, in our belief, we know, again, we don't, we state the belief that Allah is in control of everything, but we don't allow that to cause us to not stand up to oppression and not reject falsehood. But ultimately, we know that everything is in the hand of Allah. And this is what I was saying, that in a lot of those videos, when you see, I mean, there's videos of a man and he has his daughter who was being, or his son who was being watched by his sister, and both his sister and his son were killed in the bombings, and he's sitting next to them and their bodies are wrapped and for burial. He's sitting there and he's seeing that. Now, juxtapose that with us watching that. He's sitting there and he makes sajda of shukr for what he does have, because he said, I have other children who are still alive. And so that's what I want, to when we look at the faith of the people in those situations, that should reaffirm our faith. There was a story, Iraqi Veterans Against War, IVAW. Look at some of their videos. There's one Iraqi veteran who ordered a strike on a house, and he said when he ordered the strike on the house to just create a door so that they could go in to follow the insurgents that went into the building, in that strike to open the door, he wiped out an entire family, the father and all of the children, the Iraqi family that was there, except for the mother. So now when he comes in, he collapses because he ordered that RPG to go in to open that door. The mother, who just watched her children and her husband perish in that instant, she goes over and consoles the soldier. He said, she puts her hand on my face and says, MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah. That's the faith of the believer. The faith of the believer at that moment, that sadmat al-ula, at that first strike, that's where whatever you're putting into your heart. So we put into our heart, we have to really work on building up our iman so that when we're hit with that first, the first news, that instance, that's what's going to flow out of our heart. So to reaffirm that it's for Allah, do whatever you can, any spiritual exercises, reading Quran, fasting, praying, whatever you can do to increase your iman, so that when you're watching this. And then I'll also say to pace yourself within the consumption of media with those images, because when you see all of those images, you're experiencing vicarious trauma. They experience trauma by a small point, you're experiencing a certain level as well. And our bodies are not created, our minds are not created to handle that much trauma in that short of a time. So don't feel bad about doing self-care so that you can continue to consume. Some people can't even look at any images, they can only read. Some people can know their limit. I know my limit. I know when I've consumed too much and I need to do some self-care so that we don't overwhelm ourselves and get to a point where we make statements or beliefs that are not healthy. So I'll end there, and jazakumullah khair everyone for attending. There's so much more that we can do and learn from each other, and we really have to stick together. We have to stick together as one ummah, as one people. And this is something to reminding us of our humanity. As Linda was saying, that land is a land that all people of faith it's sacred to. Umar radiallahu anhu, when he conquered Jerusalem, he brought back in a community of Jewish people to populate the city that had been displaced by the ruling Byzantines. The Christians have been there since the time of Isa alayhi salam. And they're feeling the oppression, and the Christians of Gaza are under that oppression too. So we really have to stick together as human beings and keep doing what you're doing, and look for ways to serve, and ask Allah to show you how you can serve and where you can serve. Make that dua. Oh Allah, put me where you want me to be, and make me serve where you want me to serve.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Rami. That concludes our Q&A and this webinar, inshallah. Thank you so much to our three panelists for taking out the time and sharing your wisdom with us. Inshallah, all the youth who attended benefited, learned, and came away with action items and spiritual upliftment. We will be releasing a summary of resources shared by Sheikh Rami's sister Linda and Brother Corey and Care through our Instagram and through our email and our website, inshallah. So please keep an eye out on all of our avenues. And you can also email me at program@mina.org, and I'll make sure to get those resources to you, inshallah, if you don't see them.
One final thing. There was a news, we're here in the Bay Area. You might have seen the news. There was 3 hijabi sisters who just typed this in. I'll put it out there. But they were accosted by a 43-year-old man, and he choked one of them. So just be very careful, be vigilant when you go out there to demonstrations or to voice. Just be aware of your surroundings. If you can have more people, just be very safe. If you see any grouping up, if you see any facing off, go the other way. Beeline it out of it, beeline to a safe place. Make sure you have your phones, make sure you have them charged up. Make sure you invest in legal methods of self-defense, like pepper spray or whatever it might be. Have people, especially brothers. And I know we don't want to get into that thing, but there is something about having a male presence in any of those situations for the protections. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Men are the protectors of women, and there's something that psychologically happens when people see men. So I'll share the story what happened just 2 days ago in Monterey, but we don't want to see, and the very unfortunate thing have happened with a 6-year-old boy being killed in his own home by his landlord. You have to be very vigilant, because we're having, and this is Corey's field, and I know you can advise better about this, but a lot of the post 9/11 type responses from people. So be very vigilant, especially the sisters who are wearing hijab, and especially if you're going to choose to wear something that signifies Palestine, the kufiya, the flag, whatever it might be, which is well within your legal right with freedom of expression, but just be very vigilant and careful.
Absolutely. Very important to stay alert. Thank you for that reminder. All of our social media is @Mina National, and mina.org is our website. So make sure to keep an eye out for that, inshallah. Thank you so much for joining. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.